Dangerous content and the dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and the Millennial joining me today is Garrick Ross. How's it going?
Great, excellent. Another edition of Garrick and the Boomers. We got Warren Miller here with us again. I'm going to take your job, Mark.
Yeah, thank you. And Warren Miller, and of course, Christopher Hopkins, our assistant producer, and Adam Katora, our producer. Welcome, everybody. So the podcast today is entitled Dangerous Content, and the content that is dangerous is that content that apparently you're posting on Facebook. So George Stephanopoulos interviewed Mark Zuckerberg concerning Facebook's censorship of the reopen movement, going back to work movement throughout the United States. You've seen all of these protests in all the different cities in the United States at the state capitals. And people want to go back to work. They're tired of staying home. They're losing their jobs. They're losing, their companies, potentially losing their houses and businesses and everything. And so Stephanopoulos interviews Zuckerberg about the whole censorship issue on Facebook as it relates to this movement to get people to go back to work. We have several clips on this. We've broken them up on purpose because you have to listen to these clips very carefully to find out and make your own mind up as to whether you think it's appropriate for Mark Zuckerberg to be determining what you get to see on Facebook.
Policing speech.
Policing speech. And here is the first clip. Here it is.
During this pandemic, there's an awful lot of fear out there, as you know, and awful lot of bad information. And I know Facebook, at least in the last couple of weeks, has tried to figure out ways to prevent the spread of bad information across your platforms. Describe how that's working right now.
Yeah, that's right. So we're primarily doing two things. One is focused on trying to spread authoritative health information, so good information. And then the other trying to make sure that we limit the spread of misinformation. And on the positive side, we've built this COVID information center, which is it's full of information from sources like the CDC, local governments, authoritative health information. And we've put this at the top of everyone's news feed.
But does he have WHO on there as well? Information from WHO? So he's deciding, Mark Zuckerberg is deciding what you get to see on Facebook as it relates to COVID-19.
Yeah, like which sources are considered authoritative or not, and like viable authoritative ones. Maybe some states are he's putting, certain states ahead of other states, and maybe he's, putting down some maybe conservative viewpoints on opening the economy and things like that as a result. I saw YouTube had put a guideline out where they basically said that, to your concern, that any video that goes against World Health Organization guidelines on COVID, they would take down.
Which is ridiculous. I mean, why, Warren, does Facebook think that they can police a site and determine what you get to see as it relates to the pandemic?
Well, I don't think they've been challenged in court. There's a First Amendment right to free speech that applies to Facebook and other social media platforms. And, obviously they're authoritative sources. If you look at their fact checking, if you've ever seen an article posted on Facebook and below it says the information in this article is false, you look at who those groups are, they're ultra left-wing groups that are doing the fact-checking. So if they don't like the political facts, if they don't like, and I know there are a couple of Facebook groups called Reopen Maryland, Reopen Virginia. The Reopen Maryland group recently wanted to do a protest in Annapolis, and Facebook on multiple occasions removed the event.
Unbelievable.
Because they didn't like the event. They didn't like the content of the event. Now there's no hate speech there. There's no rational reason for anyone to remove an event like that, and they did.
And to be clear, these folks who went to protest at the various capitals, such as Virginia, Maryland, I think we saw them in Missouri and Michigan, those individuals were protesting because they wanted to just go back to work.
Right.
That's all they really wanted,
They're trying to influence policymakers. It's your basic right to assembly.
And it's
a basic constitutional right to assemble.
And it's not like these protests are, basically saying, let's all go back to normal and walk outside and hug each other. They're basically saying, we want to go to work and we can practice social distancing and, take all the precautions necessary, but let us earn our livelihoods and let's get back to working again.
So get this, we have good old George Stephanopoulos asking Zuckerberg another question. What about the spread of misinformation on Facebook? We have a clip on this. You have to listen to it to believe it. Here it is.
On the side of making sure that we also limit the spread of misinformation, there are a couple of different areas that we're working on. One is there's harmful misinformation. So things that could cause a risk of imminent physical harm. So things like someone spreading the idea that if you drink bleach, that can help cure this, which of course it can't. And saying something like that is dangerous. So we take that down, right? That's not allowed on our service at all. And there have been thousands and thousands of pieces of content like that that we've had to take down. There's also just broader misinformation where people say things that are false that may not put people in imminent physical risk or of danger, but we still don't want that to be the kind of stuff that's going viral on our system. So, there we actually just put out a stat that the independent fact checkers we work with have rated 4,000 different articles on our system as false, which has triggered more than 40 million warnings across the system of people viewing content. And we have a sense that those warnings work because 95% of the people who see a piece of content with a warning on it don't end up clicking through and looking at that content.
So there's Mark Zuckerberg on misinformation. So there's misinformation and then there's false information. And apparently Facebook gets to decide what is false and what is misinformation. I need some thoughts on this.
It's a great way to advance the political agenda, and in this case, it's the agenda of the left.
Absolutely, it's the agenda of the left. And what is the agenda they're trying to advance by removing information about protesters wanting to go back to work? What do you think?
I think a lot of it has to do with hatred of the president. They clearly hate the president of the United States.
They want him to fail.
They want him to fail. They want to communicate that message, and they're definitely not taking false things down about Donald Trump. And I guarantee you, if you look through Facebook, it's not hard to find.
So they're also afraid of Donald Trump
standard.
succeeding, which means they are afraid that the economy is going to succeed again. So they want the economy to fail? I mean, is that really, do you think that's possible as a millennial? Mr. Millennial.
So I've been thinking about this, and one of the things that always comes back to me about when I debate the free speech on the internet thing is that we are still talking about private companies, and so Facebook does have, essentially, even though it is a tech platform and it's a place to air speech, that they still kind of have the right to police their own platform. And I understand and I agree with the idea that, look, if somebody goes out there and says, the best way, like Zuckerberg uses the example, the best way to cure anything is to use bleach and drink bleach, and that is demonstrably false.
That's false information.
It is false information,
yes.
And it belongs nowhere on a platform. But where I get where me with my general libertarian streak here is I get kind of nervous when people start saying there's these things that may be broadly false and they might not have any harm to anybody, but we take it down anyway. But it's he never gives an example of what he would categorize as that kind of information.
Here's where I have a problem with what you just said, because the whole purpose of Facebook with the news feed is for people to debate back and forth on the news feed to say, oh, that's not true, that's false. You would actually die. And then maybe some doctor in your Facebook network would get on there and say, hey, look, I'm a doctor. I can tell you if you drink bleach, you're going to die. And then people see this. I mean, that's part of how you get to the truth. You get a lot of people debating together on Facebook, which is the whole purpose of the news feed, but he's eliminating that in certain circumstances. I agree with Warren because of his hatred of the president, but also because he's playing God. He's literally playing God.
I would agree, but anecdotally, I mean, you see a lot of examples where, maybe, and I'm not trying to single out people in the boomer generation and people older than that.
Yes, you are.
Maybe I am. I see a lot of people who they scroll past some obscure, maybe even satirical news story, and they read the clip, the caption or whatever, and the thumbnail, and they just take it as truth. And then next thing you know, you've got these weird stories circulating the internet that people think are true.
So people read the Babylon Bee, they think it's real?
They think it's real, or they see, their second cousin Trudy's husband's an FBI agent, and he says that the impending, police state is coming, and then they think that's true. And so I agree that, debate a robust debate's good and essential for people to flesh out information, but I don't know, maybe I'm a little cynical in that even with that, I think a lot of times elderly people or people who just aren't that in tune to wanting to learn the depth of the information they're presented with are taking the accurate steps necessary to garner that information.
Go ahead, Warren. Hit this.
Well, I look at it in a different viewpoint. I mean, if you're going and taking no political stance and there's questionable information on both sides, that's one thing. But if you're just picking a side as a platform and you're clearly stopping things that are newsworthy on the right and promoting things that are newsworthy on the left, you're becoming a propagandist. You're no longer a trusted news source.
Right, I would agree with that.
So in that regard, when I see valid news articles that have that Facebook disclaimer, there's false information.
Right.
that's kind of a professional thing. But if it's a Fox News story and it's got that tag below it,
Yeah.
I kind of question Facebook's authority to say it's false news because it's being reported by a validated news network, right?
Right.
And that happens.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would say really what we're trying to explore is where is the appropriate line.
But isn't it also possible that the news source that is linked into Facebook, even though the title may say something like Chinese communists may have released the virus intentionally, and Facebook finds that misinformation or not corroborated, but if you actually click the story, there's a lot of context to the story that actually gives you the information that you need in order to make an intelligent decision. So I agree with you, Warren. I mean, I think it's dangerous for this particular social network to decide what you do and do not get to see. And he's using, once again, just like government is, he's using a national emergency, an international emergency, to decide because it's his company. He gets to decide what you see. So we have George Stephanopoulos asking him yet the third question, which is, well, this is the real question, by the way, that Stephanopoulos really wanted to ask. This is where he was leading it. Well, what about those dangerous protests and rallies that defy social distancing? Are you going to allow that to continue to be posted and organized on Facebook? And here's the clip. Here's Zuckerberg's response.
So how do you deal with the fact that Facebook is now being used to organize a lot of these protests to defy social distancing and defy the social distancing guidelines in states? Is somebody trying to organize something like that, does that qualify as harmful information because it's saying defy social distancing?
Yeah, so this is an important question. If someone is spreading something which is misinformation, which certainly something saying that social distancing is not effective to help limit the spread of coronavirus, we do classify that as harmful misinformation.
Yeah, we do classify that as harmful misinformation. But, our own government told us that at the very beginning of this crisis, for a solid 6 weeks, that you didn't need to wear any kind of face covering when you were out in public. That you could just go to only essential businesses, but you didn't need any face coverings. And then, fast forward to today, the same government is telling us not only should you do it, but we're going to require you to have facial coverings. In other words, we were given misinformation by our own government, which is why we want social media, so that we can question our government about what they're doing, because I question it every day. Thoughts?
Notice how he didn't answer the question, though? George Stephanopoulos specifically asks him about these protests, and he says, well, people who are, saying that we shouldn't use social distancing are wrong. I mean, he never directly answers the question, which probably tells you that Mark Zuckerberg at some point is taking down a lot of these posts and preventing people from having rallies.
Well, as he said, he has a large number of people in Silicon Valley working for him who just policed the site. And Silicon Valley is particularly liberal and progressive. So therefore, what do you expect? That's not an answer.
So here's my problem. Another constitutional right is the right to assemble.
Yes.
It's given to us by our founders. So apparently under our new state of pandemic, you have a right to assemble at Home Depot, at Lowe's, at large grocery store chains.
Yes.
But you don't have a right to peacefully assemble.
At
and
the
going
State
beyond
House.
that, I don't remember if it's Mississippi or Missouri, recently the police went to a church where there was a service, which is another constitutionally protected right.
Mississippi, I believe, is
Mississippi
the one you're talking about. Yeah.
handed out $500 tickets to everybody that was at the church. And luckily we have a U.S. Attorney General that understands the Constitution, and he was able to go and take the side of the churchgoers, peaceful churchgoers,
Yep.
and invalidated the state's action. None of those people have to pay that fine. But I hope there's a lot of that goes on. I mean, I think that the governors, there's an extreme overreach right now. I think with Facebook, there's an overreach. This pandemic panic is enriching a few and disadvantaging a lot of others. So
Yes, it is.
you
Very
have
well
a
said.
huge number of people that are losing their livelihood right now because of unconstitutional actions by governors and the states. They have a right to assemble and protest. They have a right to try to influence the governor to change his mind about some of the policies he's enacted. Why can't you be alone on a boat in the Chesapeake Bay?
Very
Why,
true. Yeah.
why can't you be there? I mean, that's
or the river,
that's insane.
or any river.
Maryland's one of 5 states where we have a governor that thinks it's unsafe for you to be on a boat. You can go to a Home Depot with thousands of people, and anybody that's listening,
grocery store.
try going to a Home Depot. Look at social distancing. It's just not
they're
real.
everywhere. It's really busy.
The parking lot is fuller than it would ever be on a normal business day. And they're clearly making bank on that. And
Yes,
yet
they are.
You can't be on your boat in the Chesapeake Bay.
Even if it's just two people in your boat, right? You're social distancing in your own boat. But here's the fact. The fact of the matter is the 2 people or 3 people or 4 people in your boat are going to be your family members, more than likely, because you're kind of quarantined anyway in your home. So you go out on your boat, you go out into the river or the bay or the ocean, wherever you want to go, and you're being told, nope, you can't do that. You can't do that because you're what? You're not social distancing with your family? I'm sorry, it's my family.
From the crabs, the fish, I mean, what's the danger?
Now, there's some governors, though, that I got to applaud. I'm going to, plug my Texas governor here, Greg Abbott, who's done a fantastic job, I think, in balancing a lot of the issues of civil liberty and, the coronavirus. And, you can go on a boat and look at, Brian Kemp in Georgia is getting hammered right now for opening the beaches to let people walk around. But what's the difference between walking on a beach and walking on a trail? I mean, it's all the same thing.
Or walking in a park.
Or walking in a park. And so, I think, Warren, that was really well said where you were saying that a lot of people are taking this overreach for their own enrichment.
And it's the nanny states telling us that we're too stupid to be able to figure out how to protect ourselves.
Yeah.
And but their justification is, oh, you're not the problem. It's just we're not worried about you protecting yourself. We're worried about you and what you might do to others. That you might be not protecting others with your behavior. I'm sorry. We're adults in this society. It's just ridiculous.
We don't live in communist China. The government doesn't run our lives. And sadly, what this pandemic has shown us, we have a lot of people that think that we should be in communist China, and we're not able to communicate on Facebook properly. We're not able to have our own cogent thoughts.
Yeah.
We're not able to pick a business we want to do business with. Lots of places I'd like to do stuff right now are closed.
Yes,
and they're closed because the governors closed them, not because of any valid pandemic reason.
And then the same point, the governors will close those businesses and then they won't offer them any help. And so even if I want to support them and try to keep their doors open, they won't let me. And then as a result, they close their doors. Their families get sent home, and their workers get sent home, and their families suffer.
Exactly. So 2 years ago, talk about Zuckerberg. 2 years ago, Mark Zuckerberg was in front of the Senate, United States Senate, and he was testifying because he was subpoenaed and asked to come into the Senate to justify why back then he was taking down content from certain groups on his network, on the Facebook network. And we have Senator Cruz from Texas, who was grilling Mark Zuckerberg 2 years ago in the hearing of the U.S. Senate. And the purpose of the hearing, of course, was to ascertain whether or not Facebook should be regulated. And it was basically, shooting a warning shot past Zuckerberg saying, you really shouldn't be determining what people get to see, because the whole purpose of Facebook, as I said earlier, is to be able to get people to engage in dialogue and argue back and forth, hopefully intelligently and civilly, in a way that you can look at it and make up your own mind. And so we have a clip on this, and here is the clip.
In addition to that, Facebook has initially shut down the Chick-fil-A Appreciation Day page, has blocked a post of a Fox News reporter, has blocked over 24 Catholic pages, and most recently blocked Trump supporters Diamond and Silk's page with 1.2 million Facebook followers after determining their content and brand were, quote, unsafe to the community. To a great many Americans, that appears to be a pervasive pattern of political bias. Do you agree with that assessment?
Senator, let me say a few things about this. First, I understand where that concern is coming from because Facebook and the tech industry are located in Silicon Valley, which is an extremely left-leaning place.
Yeah, no kidding. Because Facebook is located in Silicon Valley, an extremely left-leaning place, per Mark Zuckerberg's comments, it's justified that there is content that's taken down primarily on the conservative side. That's okay. Thoughts on this?
I think he's just saying it's an inevitable purpose that people, well, not inevitable purpose, inevitable happening that people that are liberal are going to kind of view a lot of these conservative things as incorrect. But this is where we get back in this topic of why are people policing speech and what is the degree of acceptable policing of speech and things like that, especially on your own platform.
And by the way, Garrick, as millennials, I mean, you guys are going to be living with this for the rest of your lives because you guys are the social media generation.
Yeah.
And
the
issue
it's only
is,
get more intense.
It didn't matter so much before it mattered, but it didn't matter so much until the government started taking your rights away and you started fighting back during a pandemic.
Yeah.
And now you're saying, oh, wait a minute, I need to communicate with people about my thoughts because I'm really afraid of what might happen. Thoughts on this, Warren?
So it's just thinking way back to the days of the little neighborhood video store that eventually got bought by Arrows and then Blockbuster, and you had a national chain, and then technology came along and replaced it. So I would say a warning for Mr. Zuckerberg is at some point, somebody is going to come up with a better platform that doesn't stifle content, that allows for true free speech.
Yeah.
And I'll be one of the first ones off of Facebook and onto that other platform as fast as I can get there, and Twitter too. There have to be innovative people that are looking at this problem that can come up with better solutions than censorship.
And it's also that you point out that it's about a part of it's an age gap thing too. So your generation typically uses Facebook a lot more than my generation does. My generation exists on things like Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, and basically everything other than Facebook.
You're so woke.
No. Oh
my gosh. There we go. The millennials coming up.
I'm just
my
saying,
generation.
No, I'm just saying that there's a difference in platform. And to Warren's point that, you know, there's going to be a time.
I need a clip for that. That might be a clip on that we're going to use, and of course we're going to promote it on Facebook. I got him turning red. I love it.
My point was really just there's going to be a time where your generation isn't going to be around or in quantity to keep supporting Facebook or keep them at, you know, the precipice of, you know, the technological space, and that Facebook's going to either have to adapt or, you know, shutter itself. And we're going to, now this is the thing is,
so
monopolies.
Hopefully your generation, as you said, they're already using other platforms than Facebook. Yeah. But since Facebook is by far the largest, I agree with Warren and you both. I mean, it makes perfect sense. Hopefully someone will come up with an alternative site where they just say, hey, whatever you put out there is fine. Whatever you put out there is fine. And by the way, if something happens because of what you put out there, maybe you're the one that's at risk, not the platform. The platform just makes it available for you to be able to post it.
And we should be a little bit concerned, though, about antitrust things like that, because I don't want to live in a world where Facebook has so much capital that they're able to just purchase up every single competitive, platform.
One little thing to that point, Facebook does own Instagram.
Yeah, they do own Instagram. Yeah.
And
they're merged together.
Your solution, your Instagram solution, is owned by Facebook and inherently probably has the same censorship problems.
Right.
I'm sure of it.
I'm not too sure. I'm not big.
And your generation is using it.
Honestly, I don't use social media as much as a lot of people in my generation. I try to do other things.
Your generation is all over social media, though.
We walk around with a screen to our face, Mark. It's terrible.
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, that's what you grew up. You guys had phones at 5 years old.
I was 12, but
okay.
Yeah. Your point is well taken. Nowadays, you can't go to a restaurant.
That explains why you're so triggered. So
you can't see kids. Like, you go to a restaurant and you see kids that are just sitting there on phones, that like 7 years old, and parents are just doing that to keep them occupied. And it's going to be an issue.
And they play games and all that stuff on them. I mean, my son's been doing that for as long as I can remember, since he's had a cell phone and figured out that he could actually play games on the phone. And now, of course, you can play against other people while you're on the phone, which is pretty amazing.
Mark, I'm sure you remember as kids, we had garden hoses, dirt, firecrackers, things outside.
You went outside and you came home when the street lights turned on.
Yeah. Oh, come on. Listen to this.
I think I'm in
making fun of us again. I like it, though.
My generation is in kind of like a unique point where half our upbringing was kind of predating the mass, internet world that we live in now, but also we kind of grew up when that changed, and so we have this unique perspective. We've seen both, and some people gravitate towards one versus the other.
So listen, guys, CNN's Don Lemon, interviewing CNN's Chris Cuomo, and they're both criticizing, but primarily we have this clip of just the good old Don, who's criticizing the reopen the economy movement, this idea that people go back to work. And we have a clip on this, and I think this guy's crazy. I think there's something wrong with him. How do you pronounce his name again? It's
Don Lemon?
Is it Lemon or Lemon?
I have no idea.
He's laughing at me. He doesn't even know.
I don't even watch CNN.
So I have no
idea.
I
mean, I have to for the podcast.
I watch CNN, but I do not watch Cuomo or Don Lemon.
Okay, but we have a clip on this, and by the way, a lot of millennials watch this guy. A lot of them do. So that's why we include this in Mark the Millennials, because we want to be able to show across all platforms what's happening. And listen to this clip. It's kind of weird about what this guy says. Here it is.
I understand that you're hurting. I understand that people are hurting. Yes, a lot of people are hurting. But there are people who are frontline workers who have to get out there. I did the color of COVID this weekend. Those people are at the grocery stores who didn't expect to have their lives be placed in danger because they have to work at the grocery store. They're driving buses, and you're protesting against. You're slapping the faces of the people who are the healthcare workers who put their lives on the line every day because you want a haircut, you want to go play golf. You're concerned about. Of course, you're concerned about your business. Tell the president that. And you're out there with guns, with weapons strapped to your chest, saying, "Oh, you want to get you're fighting against the people who are telling you to stay at home, trying to save your lives. You're upset with those people. In the meantime, there are people who are keeping your cities going, keeping your loved ones alive, and you want to get a haircut? Who the hell do you think you are?"
Yeah, so there's Don Lemon basically going off on the fact that you have no business going out there and protesting. And as it is, you have no respect for all those people who are working in supermarkets because you're out there and they're the ones who are the real heroes. And by the way, they are because they're out there working, but at least they're working. I mean, he's kind of contradicting himself.
So he's the true voice of entitlement. I mean, the ability to sit home and be rich because you're on CNN and not understand the plight of anybody else and trying to put food on the table. I mean, a lot of what he doesn't understand. So let's take hospitals. Yes, we need to applaud the frontline workers that are dealing with COVID, but 50% of a hospital's business is elective surgery. They're not doing any of that right now.
Yeah,
because they're not allowed to.
So the hospital workers that are not near COVID are all being sent home and given reduced hours.
Yeah.
So there's an example of Don Lemon wanting to hurt the livelihood of people that work in hospitals. I mean, there's no understanding on his point of what these people are going through. Where's next week's money going to come from? How are you going to keep the electric on? Now, of course, that stuff can't be shut off, but the bigger hole you dig as somebody that's not working right now, is trying to support a family because their business is shuttered or their employer's business is shuttered, the bigger the hole you dig, the harder it's going to be to get out of it.
It's going to take years. It's going to take years. And Don Lemon says, no, blame the president. He's the one that's responsible. I mean, this guy, I can't believe this is a news network. Go ahead.
First of all, I think I would rather listen to Rachel Maddow because at least she doesn't yell as much as he does. My God. But second of all, I think...
she whines instead.
I will say that I think he misses the point that caring for people's health is all for naught if they can't support themselves when this is over. Because then you're not just going to have a health issue, you're going to have an economic issue. You're going to have a supply side workforce issue. And you're seeing it, take place in, like Warren here said, in the hospital industry. If you look at all these rural, there's only, I think, 3 or 4 epicenters in the United States where hospitals are overpacked. It's New York City, Louisiana, New Orleans, some places in California, and Detroit. So you have all these rural hospitals that, like Warren says, they operate on elective surgeries. They send their people home, but these hospitals, like in West Virginia, were already operating at a deficit already. And so the choices are either shutter their doors or start performing procedures again. And from the looks of it, people are just going to start shuttering their doors. And this isn't going to be unique to just the hospital space. This is going to be to every space. This is going to be heating and air conditioning contractors, restaurants.
But that's Don Lemon basically saying, these folks who go out there and they're protesting because they want to go back to work, I mean, they're the bad people. I mean, it's just, they are so disconnected, CNN is. Their elites are so disconnected because, by the way, they're still getting paid. Don Lemon's still getting paid.
Yeah.
Fredo Cuomo is getting paid.
Fredo got COVID-19, right? And then I think a week ago he had charges pressed against him for harassment because he was walking around the Hamptons looking at a house and somebody was like, "Don't you have coronavirus and shouldn't you be inside?" And he wasn't. He was violating social distancing.
Oh, of course, because rules don't apply to him. And plus,
don't apply to him. And his
he gets to go to
brother's the governor.
The Hamptons.
And his brother's the governor.
Everybody else is stuck in Manhattan where they're packed together like sardines. But of course, Chris Cuomo has a house in the Hamptons. He's like everybody else, but telling everybody else at the same time, you shouldn't go back to work.
Did you see what he posted on social media the other day where he was basically saying that once this is all done, he wants to do something else because he just doesn't feel validated in his career.
So you do use social media?
I do have social media. I do.
I'm just checking.
I use Twitter. I'm enlightened over here.
Yes, he's very enlightened. He uses Twitter, but but nothing else apparently. He doesn't use Facebook like all those older people. But as the older people die off, as he says, there'll be a new platform that'll come.
I use Facebook so my grandmother can send me memes all day. That's really what it's all about.
So AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, suggests that low-income workers should boycott their jobs when they're able to go back to work, that is, but then at that time refuse to do so. So she's saying, don't go back to work when the economy is opened up. All of you low-income workers, we have a clip on this. It's actually ridiculous. But she says, she argued Wednesday that many Americans should protest economic insecurity by refusing to work after the coronavirus-related restrictions are lifted. She made her comments during an interview with Vice TV host Anand Giridharadas, took me a while to be able to pronounce that, by the way, who famously speculated, this is the same guy that speculated, that Donald Trump's sexual insecurity was literally threatening to annihilate the planet. We'll go to that in a minute. But first, we have a clip on AOC, and here she is.
There's a lot that we could be doing right now, but ultimately, I think when we talk about this idea of reopening society, only in America does the president, when the president tweets about liberation, does he mean go back to work? When we, have this discussion about going back or reopening, I think a lot of people should just say, no, we're not going back to that. We're not going back to working 70-hour weeks just so that we could put food on the table and not even feel any sort of semblance of security in our lives.
That's just so ridiculous. That's so ridiculous. Go ahead, Warren. I know you're dying to hit this one.
So this is another person who was a bartender and apparently got all of her knowledge from being a bartender. But her economics, she lived through the Obama depression that we had. And she's still living there. She can't get out of it. She can't shake her head for the fact that under this president, the economy is much better. And yes, there are some people that have to work 70 hours, but there are a lot that don't because the economy's gotten better. A lot of people have gotten off welfare. Mm-hmm. They've gotten off this setting at home waiting for somebody to pay them to do nothing. And the second part of this is she doesn't understand that small business, the 50%, it generates 50% of the country and the state's income. So for all these entitled, rich, whatever, and she's not, but she wants to be in Congress, she's trying to vote herself a pay raise.
Yeah, of course.
They don't understand that the revenue, the things that keep things open, state government open, state employees working, county employees working, teachers working, all these vital elements of our economy right now, half the economy is not paying their taxes because of the government shutdown. And yet these people think we're going to come through the other side and open, and the money's just going to be there for the taking.
So half the economy, so the part of the economy that's in government continues to get paid, and they get paid by the taxes that are generated from the private sector, predominantly from the private sector, without question. But the private sector is shut down, and yet
you can't generate those taxes.
And yet she's arguing, well, don't go back to work when you have an opportunity to, because of the fact that you've been abused and so forth in our economy. I mean, literally, we have been abused by the Chinese communists, and here she is espousing communism. Literally, that's what she's saying. Workers of America, unite! Don't go back to work. What the heck?
First of all, let's just address what she was saying. She was saying once this opens up, once Trump opens the economy, probably in a couple of weeks here, and don't go back to work if you're scared of Corona. And you can do that because this is the United States and there is no compulsory work requirement here. And fun fact, the CARES Act that everybody's been relying on for unemployment insurance, especially, gig workers, that doesn't expire until December. So you could conceivably stay home and collect your unemployment until December if you wanted to. Which brings me to another point. One of the people who had a great point about the CARES Act when it was in the House and in the Senate was Ben Sass and Mike Lee and a couple of those other people who were concerned that this, I'm not going to say it's a loophole, but this setup is going to cause some issues with small business economy, whereas people are going to make more money to sit home and not work when things open up, and that is going to be detrimental to small businesses.
Dangerous stuff.
You're seeing it all over where people who had jobs that are still working, at places that are staying open and doing delivery, just opted to just not work, and then they stay home and they collect unemployment. And this is kind of the danger of where we're trying to put in all these, nanny state policies, and especially these welfare policies to assist people. And I understand that, but it's also about getting people back to work too, and not incentivizing them not to work.
And she talked about, we don't want you to go back to that 70-hour work week, because just to be able to put food on the table, you're working 70 hours. What she didn't talk about is prior to the COVID-19 epidemic, the United States of America had the strongest economy in the history of the world, and people at the bottom were actually moving up faster than people in the middle class.
Lower raising wages.
An extraordinary accomplishment of this particular president, and of course of the American people, of all of the American people working.
3 years of wage growth versus none in the previous 8 years.
But she never misses an opportunity to be able to espouse her Marxist beliefs, and she really is a Marxist. I mean, I'm hoping she loses in the primary. I'm hoping the Democrat, or that she's gerrymandered out of her district.
I'm not one who typically likes to sit and badger people based on what I perceive as their intellectual capacity. But she's one of those people that when I hear her talk, I just don't understand. Because the other day, if you saw her cheering about the price of oil, where it was negative $37 a barrel, which basically she was saying, oh, well, there are some strategic issues. And so since oil is in the negative, we should invest in green energy. And it's like, do you understand how pricing works? Now is the best time to ever buy oil
Fill those
ever.
tanks.
Yeah.
Exactly. Fill them as much as you can. In fact, if you can, go buy some tanks, bury them in your yard and fill them up with oil. If you can, or gasoline. I mean, that would be a really smart thing to do. Actually, for those who can.
Better return than you get on the stock market.
At much better return, and less volatile as well, because it's going to go up at some point.
It's amazing. This is the first time in my life, because first of all, with the regular stock market, because we're talking about futures and commodities here, so you can actually have a negative. Seeing stocks hit zero, the company goes out of business. But seeing a physical commodity enter the negative was just wild. Never in my life had I seen anything like that.
Absolutely. So look, MSNBC host Anand Giridharadas is the one that asked AOC that question. This is the same guy in January of 2018, who said that he was talking about Trump's sexual insecurity, and he declared that Trump's sexual anxiety was reflected in a tweet warning North Korea leader Kim Jong-un not to use the nuclear weapon because Trump had a bigger button. And so so we actually have this clip from, and by the way, he's an MSNBC analyst, Anand Giridharadas, and here he is in January of 2018. Here he is.
As we saw all through 2017, men with profound sexual insecurity can wreak a lot of havoc in the lives of women, in the lives of their families. But perhaps never have we seen a man whose profound sexual and masculine insecurities are literally threatening to annihilate the planet. I mean, the way he's literally capitalizing in that tweet, his nuclear button. Any psychiatrist or psychologist would have a field day with that. But we all live in a world that could literally be ended in terms of a habitable planet because of this sad man's insecurity.
I'm wondering.
Yeah, so Donald Trump is the problem, because Donald Trump said that he had a bigger button than Kim. But meanwhile, the true threat, as we all know, to civilization as we know it, is communist China, communist North Korea, Iran, Marxist and communist Venezuela, communist Cuba. I don't know. Does anyone see a pattern? Just say it.
I just think the whole thing is weird. I mean, going on about how Trump's red button is his red button statement is somehow
bigger,
but he's saying that as it's a bad thing, as if this is some unprecedented thing he said. I'm sorry, but Trump is not the most elegant person. This is just basically another way of saying, you're an evil empire and I have a better conventional force than you, as well as a nuclear stockpile. He just basically says it in Trump's terms. That's all he's doing, is conveying a message that we are a superpower and we have every means to annihilate you if we need to.
But only MSNBC would engage in this psychobabble, Warren.
Yeah, it is. It's totally psychobabble. I mean, the guy's not a psychiatrist. He has no basis of understanding for the president's mindset. The president has a beautiful wife. There's no reason for the assertions that are being made. And I would love for this guy to have to answer and tell me the last president to set foot in North Korea.
Yes, right.
Yeah.
That would be a fun question to ask this jerk on TV.
To try to build a bridge.
Yeah.
To really, truly build a bridge.
I mean, you rattle the saber when you have to rattle the saber. That's what a president does. And if you have a hostile nation, that's part of diplomacy.
And isn't it part of Trump's his style anyway to be able to send two simultaneous messages? One is I want to work with you, and the other is
don't screw me.
don't mess with the United States of America because we have a bigger button.
Just because the previous administration, their 8 years, was absolutely abysmal on foreign policy does not mean that should be the norm of how we approach foreign policy.
What is on the left?
Right, but they're all outraged because Trump's done things on the international scene that Barack Obama never thought to do, or Joe Biden.
And they didn't want to. And they didn't want to. Well said. So speaking of Kim Jong-un from, of course, North Korea, speaking of him, apparently he's sick, dying, incapacitated. No one really knows.
Who knows?
But the report came from CNN, and I followed through with this multiple times online, and it really, all the other reports that subsequently came out said CNN reported that.
Yes.
So CNN was the primary source for this, and apparently it is true that Kim at least hasn't been seen in public for a while. So Brett Baer of Fox News asks Trump at his press conference, what about Kim Jong-un? And here is the clip.
North Korea, what can you tell us about the status of Kim Jong-un?
Well, these are reports that came out, and we don't know. We don't know. I've had a very good relationship with him. I wouldn't, I can only say this, I wish him well, because if he is in the kind of condition that the reports say, that the news is saying, that would be that's a very serious condition, as you know. But I wish him well. We've had a good relationship. I've said it many times. If somebody else were in this position, we would have been right now at war with North Korea. And we're not at war, and we're nowhere close to war with North Korea. So I just have to say to Kim Jong-un, I wish him very, good luck. Good luck. I mean, they came out with very, very serious medical reports. Nobody's confirmed that. It was CNN that came out. So when CNN comes out with a report, I don't place too much credence in it.
So there you have it. When CNN comes out with a report, I don't put much credence in it. But here's the thing: Kim does. He's a chain smoker.
He's very gluttonous.
He's way overweight, and he has apparently heart problems. That apparently all those things are true and are well known. But wouldn't it be absolutely awesome if this guy got COVID from the Chinese communists, because that would take him out. I just want podcast listeners to hear me out here. Right? I'm not saying I want this guy to die, because if he does die, there's going to be a lot of instability in the world as a result of him passing away. But it would be kind of karma that a Chinese leader who has killed so many of his own countrymen and governed as an Iron Man would be the one that would be dying from a communist disease. Go ahead.
There's a movie quote about, the devil you know is better than the one you don't.
Yeah.
And I hate to say this, but as bad as he is, we don't know what would replace him.
We don't know what the succession plan is.
They seem to be stark raving lunatics over there in their succession plan. None of them have been very open, or they have people starving in that country.
Still,
because they spend a huge amount on weapons and nothing else, and
Absolutely.
they don't have oil. They don't. You see the satellite photos of North Korea. It's dark. There are no streetlights in North Korea. Maybe around their military facilities, and that's about it. So their people are underfed, poor. I guess all we can hope for is that at some point that changes.
I agree with you, and my understanding is his sister actually has an opportunity. Of course, that would be the first woman to ever rule if he were to pass. But I'm not really sure the military would accept a woman as to be the head of North Korea, but at least she carries.
It will be whoever
lineage.
the Chinese Communist Party says it's going to be, because that's how the Kims got into reign in the 1940s with their communist revolution and whatnot. But when he does pass, and if there is some kind of regime poll there, as in people trying to figure out who's going to be the leader there, it'll be very interesting for world dynamic to see what we can do to kind of influence and maybe, try to reunite Korea or try to get some kind of a semblance of a democratic regime there. But China, of course, doesn't want that, because China wants to keep that buffer between the West and our influence in South Korea away from their border.
And the takeaway from this is the world is changing so rapidly.
Yeah.
You literally would have to watch the news 24/7, because we have this potential instability in North Korea. We have a pandemic. We have Iran's setting off missiles. All of our enemies are essentially basically gathering together against the United States of America because they're perceiving weakness. And that's what happens when nation states are in an undeclared war. And I've been saying this for a while. We're not just in a Cold War with China, but we are in an undeclared war with all of our enemies across the planet. And I am, for one, happy that this is the president that we have, because I don't think Barack Obama could have managed this process whatsoever. Final thoughts on that?
I would agree.
Cool. So next up, we have the dumbest bill in America. It's the dumbest bill in America. And do we have a lead up, Mr. Assistant Producer? Of course. Here it is. Dum 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 dum. So the dumbest bill in America, and you're gonna love this. Mandating electric vehicles. Mandating them. In other words, House Bill 1233, sponsored by Delegate Fraser Hidalgo of the state of Maryland. His bill would mandate zero-emission electric vehicles that would be bought by the state. So the entire state fleet, no matter what the vehicle was, if his bill were to pass, from that point forward would have to be electric vehicles. No other choices, by the way. Not hydrogen-powered cars, not fuel cell-powered cars, not hybrids, not combustible engine cars. Only one kind, the kind that he loves the most. And so that would be House Bill 1233, mandating electric vehicles. And I just think he's so smug that this is what he wants. This is my personal opinion. But here is the bill sponsor introducing his bill. Here it is.
Mr. Chair and members of the committee, I'm here to introduce Bill House 1233. It's a state vehicle conversion to zero emissions. Essentially, as this committee is well aware, because we are so well educated in this committee, that we have a ZEV goal mandated to reach 300,000 vehicles in the state of Maryland by 2025. We're currently at 24, a little over 24,000. We have multiple bills in this year to help accelerate that.
So there you go. That's the bill sponsor introducing the bill. Before we go to our panel, we have another clip from the same bill sponsor, Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, who has put in this mandate for electric vehicles, the dumbest bill in America, by the way. And here he is talking about how woke he is versus and how woke we are as a state versus the others. And here's the clip.
Look at us and compare us to like California, Oregon, Washington State, New Jersey, or New York. We're probably in the middle of the ground. For example, New Jersey, this is what's crazy, is that doing research for this bill as well as the other bill that I had, New Jersey is actually further ahead than just about any country, any state. New Jersey gives tax credits for the purchase, when you purchase the vehicle. They also are tax-free. So if you purchase the vehicle, you don't pay sales tax on the vehicle. You also get a big rebate back from the state. There's charging incentives that make us look like we're in the Stone Age. New Jersey, I was shocked to see how far New Jersey has come compared to us.
Oh, isn't that interesting? Warren, this is right down your alley. Let's hear what you have to say about the dumbest bill in America.
So one of the oldest, most annoying things to me about legislatures is when you cannot compete in the real world. You have a product that you can't sell. You come to a legislature and you say, hey, can you mandate this for me? And that's exactly what this is. These vehicles tend to be a lot more expensive than normal gas combustion, especially with gas prices now. Think about it.
Great point.
$1.99 a gallon. Why wouldn't you want a state fleet running around on that? But, you know, there's multiple bad parts of this. The first one is these vehicles that he is espousing are going to cause a huge environmental problem in the future on our landfills. These batteries are toxic.
Yes, lithium.
There's a measure that goes into the CO2 production cost for things. Mm-hmm. And when you start to look at the electric vehicles, the CO2 production cost is vastly higher. It's like 40% higher than a gas production vehicle to produce it, to make it.
So through the entire production manufacturing process, yes, it actually costs more in terms of, and takes more energy to be able to create these all electric vehicles, yes, because you have to mine the lithium that is, yes, put inside the battery. And of course, then it's toxic once it has to be disposed of.
Right.
Go ahead.
So then another whole part of this people don't realize is you pay a higher electric bill every month for this nonsense. The rebates, the tax credits, all this stuff, it's coming out of the taxpayer's pocket. So who was hurt the most by this? The poor.
Middle and lower class.
The poor that have to pay higher taxes and have to pay higher utility bills because environmentalists like electric vehicles right now.
Yes, they do.
And they want to promote electric vehicles and force the entire state fleet to be electric vehicles. So, I mean, I can go on for hours about this, and I won't.
But if you buy an electric vehicle,
infuriating.
so you said that if you buy an electric vehicle, you not only get a federal tax rebate, so you actually get a check, but many states, certainly not all, but many states also have additional check that would come to you in terms of a tax credit, which means a check that comes to you for buying that electric vehicle. So they're getting all of these benefits.
This is where I'm a little bit confused. So he kind of confused two issues. So obviously in Maryland, he wants regular people driving around to buy electric vehicles also.
Yes, he does.
And there are all these benefits there. And I think that's the confusing part of this. This bill is talking to just state vehicles.
So right, it mandates state vehicles have to be electric vehicles, correct?
And I believe that if a county or a state buys these vehicles, they're already exempt from taxes. So there's no benefit there per se because you're already not paying the tax.
That's right.
I just think there's this unhinged cult of green activists out there that want to prescribe to us what we drive, how we live, what we eat, the whole 9 yards. And this bill reflects that. It's one of many pieces in this puzzle of this cult.
It is a cult. And what I find interesting, don't forget, there's a climate emergency. This is what they tell us. We have a clip from this same hearing of this bill. And the clip is concerning the League of Conservation Voters. The representative from the League of Conservation Voters came and provided testimony. We have a short clip on this, and they're talking about how there's a climate emergency, and that's why we must pass this bill. And here's the clip.
I've been before you many times this year, urging this committee to continue its strong record of making important strides towards addressing climate change and putting Maryland on the path to being a leader on climate policy nationwide. The repetition of my testimony before you this year simply demonstrates the commitment of so many legislators to rising to the urgency of the moment and how critical the work it is you do to our collective future, as well as how much work there is to do. Confronting the climate emergency is a relentless challenge that must be attacked with robust action in all sectors of the economy.
So there's a climate emergency, and therefore we're going to mandate that you purchase all of this, your state. We're going to mandate that you purchase electric vehicles only, but not hydrogen vehicles, not combustible engine vehicles, not hybrids, not fuel cells. No. Just this one kind, because I'm sure, they're getting all kinds of donations and benefits if you really follow the money. And as you said, it's a cult. This is the way we have to go because there's really no emissions. But as you said, Warren, there really are because they have to mine all of this lithium. And that requires an enormous amount of pollution and literally destroys entire ecosystems in order to mine it.
So here's the thing. Warren talked about an energy scheme. And so let's talk about the refueling aspect of electric vehicles here. So when you plug it in, you basically have to go onto the electric grid and you get your fuel that way instead of gas. But I don't believe that there is any state in the United States that has a 100% renewable energy portfolio, Maryland included. I think at the most right now we're at 40% renewables. And so basically what we're going to look at is an increased consumption of fossil fuels to burn in order to meet the electrical needs of electric vehicles on the grid. And so what they're going to come back with eventually in the future is saying that we need to pump up the numbers on the renewable portfolio in order to continue this green scheme that Warren's talking about.
There's one truth that I've seen coming into the legislature in 2003, and that is every year we have a crisis, and every year things are getting worse.
There's an emergency.
Yes.
But we've spent billions and billions and billions of dollars at the state level on this emergency, and things are getting worse.
Yes, they are. That's according to them.
What's the takeaway from that? Because most of their money goes into advocacy and hiring people to yell louder about the climate emergency.
Absolutely.
Billions of dollars have been put into the Chesapeake Bay to clean it. Well, no, they haven't. They've hired people that go out and beat people up and scare them about the health of the bay. And in reality, they've done very little. And this is just one more, like I said, tile or piece of this whole green puzzle. A lot of it has to do with public and taxpayer money so that people can enrich themselves for being a part of this cult.
And look at wind.
Absolutely.
Look at wind. I mean, we always come back to these wind farms that people want to put in, and then they go and we get the project, and they say it's going to cost us $10 billion, and let's get the state to help kick in $3 billion. But then every year they're always going to come back to the legislature, and they're going to say, oh, well, that $3 billion, that's really not enough to keep us competitive. We need another $2 billion. And it's the same thing year after year. And Warren talked about it, and I agree with it. Products should be able to stand alone. They should be affordable. They should be able to be produced without needing subsidies out the wazoo.
And let people decide for themselves.
And let people decide
for themselves. So the League
of
Conservation Voters said there's a climate emergency, and Delegate Fraser Hidalgo, the bill's sponsor, said we're in the Stone Age. But of course, he drives a Tesla. I just want you to know, isn't it interesting? He drives a Tesla, and when he parks it in the legislature, what I find interesting is he plugs it into the wall, and the taxpayers of Maryland pay for his fuel. And so that makes him super woke, and that makes it, but that's okay. But you know what? If I went to, I don't know, the local police station or, you know, some sort of station that was owned by the state, and they had their own gas station that they fueled the vehicles, and I put that gasoline in my car, I would be arrested. But yet it's okay if you get your electricity for free from the state of Maryland because you drive a Tesla and you get to park it in your House of Delegates parking space and get free electricity. That's what I call hypocrisy, and I call it very smug. And we have a clip on this. It's one of my favorite clips from South Park, talking about how smug and progressive we are in San Francisco because we drive electric vehicles. And here's the clip.
Wow, so everyone here drives a hybrid, huh? Oh, of course. We're a little more progressive and ahead of the curve here in San Francisco. Anyway, I'm sure you'll find it much better here. Yes, you'll find that San Francisco is pretty much more open-minded and grown up than the Midwest. We're just a little bit more protective of our environment here in San Francisco. Yeah, we sure are.
So there you go. So that clip from South Park pretty much sums it up. When you are a progressive across the country, certainly in Maryland, you're just so smug. You're so much better than everybody else because you get to put bills in and vote yourself all these benefits because you can, because you're in charge. Final thoughts on this, Warren?
So a companion bill to this, people may not realize, a couple years ago, Maryland enacted something. They want to build 35,000 free electric vehicle charging stations across the state.
Wow.
So think about that. You go and you buy the electric vehicle, and Mark and I have talked a lot about this. You get a federal tax credit, a state tax credit, you get special parking, you get to drive in HOV lanes with one person, you get to break all the rules. And now we're going to force all of Maryland's ratepayers to give you free electricity for your electric car.
Exactly.
At 35,000 locations. I would be, if I was a ratepayer and heard this, I would be angry that you're subsidizing this behavior. Now, I guess if you don't own an electric vehicle, you might be happy about it, but there really aren't that many people driving Teslas around.
Absolutely. And there really aren't that many. I mean, and as you well know, the people that are driving them are driving those Teslas that are $120,000 for the most part. I'm not saying that you can't buy a cheaper Tesla because Tesla is coming out, to be fair, with less expensive vehicles. But the ones that I see are the rich liberals, the rich progressives, you know, dropping $120K and then getting thousands of dollars in rebates because they are really woke.
But that's how it should be done. I mean, if we really care and we want people to be driving electric vehicles, then it should be the earnest of the industry to innovate and create cheaper products that people want to buy.
Yeah, well, I mean, but of course, as Warren said earlier, gas is at an all-time low, and what you'd probably want is a combustible engine because, you know, you can actually afford to keep it on the road. But the only way the Tesla drivers can afford to compete, as you said, is because the ratepayers are paying for their energy.
Yeah, I mean, traditionally in America, you make a better product, you sell more.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
And we didn't bail the buggy whip makers out. When they came out with the first car, we didn't go and the coach, the carriage makers, all those people,
innovation,
they all lost their jobs. They either started making cars or they just stopped.
Adapted, yeah.
Exactly.
Well, why is this the government's role to do this for electric vehicles? Why can't they build an electric vehicle that people want to buy without all these incentives? And what it shows me is a failed marketplace when they have to have the government subsidize them and bail them out and make them attractive.
And that is the dumbest bill in America. And the final thought for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our millennial, Garrick Ross. Warren Miller, and of course our producer Adam Couture and our assistant producer Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and our website. See you next time.